Yes, DAP meetings are available on the DAP website. I had been asked to, before I move on, to see if we could alter the order of business, mainly because of the length of time that the Belmont item took last time, and that one of the officers from the town of Vic Park has a meeting or another appointment to attend. But I'm also advised that there are presenters in relation to the Belmont item who have a plane to catch. So unless someone wants to make that move, I'm going to leave it the order of business as it presently is.
Won't take long.
And I'm sure that we will not be as lengthy as we were the first time round. So moving on then to Part B, Item 1, declarations of due consideration. Are all members familiar with the material before you today? Okay, good. Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of interest? No, I have just to note that I attended the SAP mediations and that I'm able to consider the item with impartiality. So we'll move on to item 5.1. This is the self-storage facility on Grayson Highway in Belmont. We have a presenter in Mr. Andrew Cumming. Mr. Cumming, can you do your presentation, noting that these presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Mr. Cumming.
Thank you, presiding member and DAP members. I'll keep myself brief. I'll largely hand over to Will Leith as it was a joint presentation. I'm available, I'm the planner on the case, and available to answer questions, but I will, once we're ready, get Will Leith as the project architect to present to the slides that we've got here today.
No worries. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us to talk. Obviously, 3 minutes isn't much time, but I'll just race through it. I think for... Oh, sorry.
So everyone else can see it.
Yeah. Start.
Thank you.
Okay, so I thought we'd just to run through this. What we just want to focus on is the changes that have occurred since December. Obviously, we've worked with Clayton and Brendan from the City of Belmont and the team over the ensuing period to listen to the concerns, but also come back with a responsive design that addresses some of those issues. Obviously, this is just where we left off in December. Since then, we've worked through one of the larger issues in the project from the city's point of view, which appeared to be the activation. And as you can see now from the revised northern elevation fronting the Greater Western Highway, you can see the extended porosity that we've now incorporated into the design. We've also adjusted the uses of the ground floor to incorporate an office use and a retail use that bookend the length of the elevation. The balance of the facade is now an open walkway that doesn't have any storage units that abut the elevation. And what that does is it allows us to have cross ventilation and light penetration into that walkway and circulation space. And that circulation space connects visitors from the retail entry down into the office area at the other end. You can see, and I'm sure you guys have assessed this yourselves, but you can see the deep level of detail that we've incorporated into the facade. We've adjusted and incorporated some additional signage, but also some elements in the facade which alternate in the different pieces of the facade where it's broken into modules. We've incorporated the national storage colours, the yellow and black, into physical follies that interact with humans as they walk down to the bus stop. And we've also increased the setback of the facade subsequent to our mediation discussions. As you can see here, the facade itself is quite activated and presents as a very porous building, particularly on that ground plane. We've also incorporated some vertical fins that encapsulate the upper levels. This provides shadow relief to the facade, but also provides that interaction with the street. Again, that is probably the last image that we need to talk about, but that is the adjusted facade that you'll see here is a much more commercial looking building, obviously an activated ground plane in this location fronting the Greater Western Highway.
And maybe just to point out with that particular image, so there has been the addition of an office, as mentioned in the RAR. So that's not a separate tenancy; it's interrelated to the wider use. So what there has been examples on the East Coast, as we understand it, with National Storage's operations, that people that have a storage unit may have a business that they need to answer some queries on a laptop or whatever the case may be. Therefore, the space with desks and an ability to, much like I've got here, set up a laptop, answer some queries, get your stock, and off you go to your next appointment. So the idea of that was to both be, I suppose, active and address the reasons for refusal, but actually have something that's a necessary component of the wider operations.
I think this image is quite a good representation of the activation. There's going to be people walking up and down those corridors during the day, and it will be lit during night. So I think from a passive surveillance point of view, it begins to tick all of those boxes that we were discussing this time in December.
And maybe the only other aspect we might raise, if you go to the floor plate, is so that was the previously refused version with obviously storage units direct to the street and the landscaping component where the cursor is, whereas now we have a corridor. It's a key change, and one that actually, rather than just glazing fronting those units, as I think was discussed back in December, we actually have the possibility and the opportunity for interaction between the street, the landscaping component, and the building itself.
Just to be clear, that is the office location, and this is the box shop over here, and the corridor, that glazed link, runs all the way along that facade.
I think the only other aspect to raise is the landscaping setback has been increased to allow for, I think there was two main comments, to make sure that the landscaping proposed in terms of vegetation, trees, would be successful. It also removed a component that the design review panel had previously discussed, which was a retaining wall that was going along that entire length. Part of that was a seating opportunity, but we acknowledged that it had an opportunity to I suppose better those future plantings. So I suppose from there we're available to take any questions.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks. Well, panel members, are there questions of the presenters? Yes, Councillor Marks.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Good. Thank you. The glazing on the front, is this going to be open glazing as we're seeing at the moment, or are they going to tint it at some stage? What's going to happen there? Or
in relation to the glazing, it'll be clear glass.
Will continue to be clear glass.
Yes, doesn't need to be fire rated.
I think the question was more around, will it be tinted to prevent, I suppose, sunlight penetration?
Well, no, it'll be the glazing. Once we obviously get into the detailed design, it'll be in accordance with the energy ratings that we need to comply with.
Mm.
And the intent of this process was to make sure that we're on the limit of the opportunity to have clear glazing, noting that.
Yeah, one of the key things that we talked about last time was if this building ends up with too much glass on it, it goes from naturally ventilated building to a mechanically ventilated building. So obviously there are components in the building now with those two occupied spaces that require mechanical ventilation, but we've worked through this in a way where the extent of glazing is as far as we can go without making the building, worse off from a carbon point of view.
Thank you. Further questions from panel members? Yes, Lindsay.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch your names, Andrew and
Will.
Will, okay, thank you. Now, I wasn't on the panel when this item was considered before, so just please indulge me a little bit. I've got a sense of why it was refused, but can you just indicate to me why this is the highest and best use for this site?
I suppose maybe to take a step back, it's possibly not straight away a question of that. The planning framework enables it to be a discretionary land use. It needs to satisfy certain objectives through the zone's objectives, but obviously the wider planning framework and the scheme. So we did work through that in terms of both our application originally, but also importantly the DAP meeting where it was refused. There was certain key aspects that needed to be addressed to actually satisfy those objectives I mentioned for the zone, and for therefore the use itself to be accommodated and approved.
Sure.
And so those key items related to the setback and the landscaping that came with that setback to make sure it's a successful outcome. Activation, particularly at the ground plane, albeit we've actually extended that up the facade to make sure there's, as you read the building, there's certain modules and a rhythm to the facade, which is important for this location, rather than a large expanse and therefore a very horizontal building. And the last component was, I suppose, tied to that previous component was visual interest, which is something that we've spoken to in terms of the addition of certain other elements that articulate the facade beyond what was a clean facade previously. But most importantly, and that's the bit that I mentioned right at the end, was the component to actually have activity viewed from the public realm. So that was a key change of not having the storage units primarily for the entire length of the ground floor facade. So to have a corridor actually changed the discussion point of where visually articulating the building to something that we're actually activating the ground plane. So those were the three components from the refusal reason, the key refusal reasons that we were required to address to be able to put us in a position for the land use to be accepted. And we say that we've done everything that was asked of us and more to allow for, I suppose, in some way to get to where you're aiming at, which perhaps is more the positive side of the planning framework as opposed to what the actual planning framework is set up as, which is, do we satisfy the objectives and not cause an undue adverse impact? Again, we say we do.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it as well is that when you say highest and best use, that assumes that someone else wanting to buy the land would put something else on it. This property went out to market last year, and self-storage was a discretionary use under the scheme, and therefore it was the highest and best use based on that sale.
Sure, thank you for the lesson also in planning. I understand the whole issue of a de-use. This is effectively a warehouse. I mean, my question was that there could have been a higher and better use. I mean, as a comparison, our next item on the agenda is residential units, which are clearly there's a high demand for in Perth, valued at about 11.5 million, with this as a storage facility at 19 million. So residential could have been a use for this site, and indeed at a higher density even than we're considering in Victoria Park. I understand that you're acting on behalf of your client, and your client does storage. So I understand that. I guess my question was, in thinking it through from a town planning perspective and having regard to the objectives that the City of Belmont have, is this the best use for the site? That's what I'm trying to sort of clarify. I appreciate that there was a refusal. It's moved on from that, but I just want to be comfortable in my mind that this is the highest and best used. Certainly it is from your client's point of view. Would you also like...
Also saying, Lindsay, that to get to those residential outcomes, you need some supporting land uses.
Key infrastructure.
And so we say that a storage unit, particularly for apartments where you lack storage generally, yes, you have to have 4 square metres or whatever it is under the R codes. But generally for those bigger items, you can't store it in the building. And so what we're finding in other areas, such as the City of Perth, where the DAP has approved an outcome for a land use consistent with this for national storage was it was seen as a catalysing use to actually support a precinct to get to. I mean, yes, further up the highway, there's a specific precinct, albeit outside the City of Belmont's planning framework, that has supported residential outcomes, arguably a better site for those outcomes, whereas we can, through this use, actually get to where you're talking about. So I think that's worth considering.
Yeah. Look,
Can I just?
I mean, there is residential because we know that.
Yeah. We just need to focus on this item, which is before us, rather than what might be or could be.
Sure. Thank you, Clayton. I was just making a comparison.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Quite often applicants get the opportunity to comment on the submission, certainly the submissions that were made in the first round, of which there are about 5. There has been a late written submission come in. Do you have any comment on that at all?
I wasn't aware we had
It was published on the agenda, so it was available for everybody to see. So there is a written submission, but if you haven't seen it, then that's fine. That's all. Thank you, Clayton.
Okay. Further questions from panel members? No? Okay, thank you for that. I'll move. Well, just also to note, as Lindsay pointed out then, that there was or is a written submission, which we have all read from some neighbours there, just noting that. And moving on then to the City of Belmont offices. Who's there for that? Brandon. I see you. Can we go out of that shared screen, please?
Yeah, thank you.
Brandon, over to you. If you want to do any presentation or just have questions.
Yeah, at this stage, I don't have a presentation, but before I take question, I thought it might be worthwhile shedding light on the scheme amendment number 22, just to give the rest of the panel members a bit of context. So a bit of background is the city has actually initiated scheme amendment number 22, which seeks to insert or seeks to make warehouse and storage as an X use in the mixed use zone, and also update the objectives of the mixed use zone to align with the scheme definition. So one thing to bear in mind in that is at the time of writing the report and as of the current stage, we still have not received consent from the DPLH to advertise the amendment. So therefore, we want to make it clear that, whilst there's a scheme amendment happening in the background, it has very little bearing on the determinant of the application at this stage. And the other part, which I might touch on very briefly, noting Councillor Mark's questions earlier about the glazing, where certainly if it is of benefit for consideration by the panel, just to maintain clarity of the glazing for visual permeability, I certainly have a draft conditions if the panel member wishes to consider that.
Thank you, Brandon. Questions of Brandon from panel members? Yes, Lindsay.
Brendan, thank you. Part of the approval, and I think in some of the conditions, it refers to the plans marked in red. Can I assume that they are the updated plans? Because the only plans I could find marked in red were the plans that actually got refused. So you have marked up the updated plans. Panel can assume that.
Crossover, they actually were on the refusal.
Yeah.
We understood what was intended though.
Yeah. So I've just got the revised development plans, and those were marked and are synonymous with the condition number.
Yeah. I just wanted to confirm that, because certainly I've got the refused plan here, and it is marked up with things that need to be changed. So I just want to be comfortable that if this moves towards an approval, that there is a plan that's marked up accordingly, and it could occur sort of after the event, I suppose. Just have a question on condition 32. Now, aside from the fact that the word eastern is missing from what the wording of the restrictive covenant would say. I know what you're meaning about the length from A to B, but I couldn't find a plan or anything that defined A to B. So where is A to B?
I have to refer that to the because I believe condition originated from Main Road's comments.
Yes.
That's something that I can certainly will have to refer back to their comments and provide further info.
Okay, look, it is possible that we could further define that if this moves towards an approval, just to make the wording of the restrictive covenant quite clear, that it applies to the extent of the frontage of Great Eastern Highway, something like that. Just another question on the conditions, presiding member, if I may. Actually, it's advice notes. Advice note 12 says that development approval is not granted to signage, but then advice note 13 says that signage approval has been granted. So which is it?
I believe there was during the original determination, there were perhaps confusion about what was included, whether signage was included or not. As I understand, as part of this updated plans, that they've also reconfigured their signage, which is considered as part of this reconsideration. So I'd say the advice note is.
Okay, so it might be possible to delete advice note 12 already, and there's no other additional signage, no pylon signs or anything like that. It's just the signage on the building. Yeah. Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you. That's all from me.
Yes, sorry, Mayor Rossi.
Thank you. Just wondering why we didn't present this back to the design review panel.
I think it did.
No, not I'm sure he didn't say that.
So through the chair, the plans that were discussed during, I believe, the first mediation was presented to the design review panel, and one of the remaining concerns were by the design review panel were to do with the treatment of the building along the Great Eastern Highway, which through the mediation process with the amended plans, they've addressed the design review panel comments. Therefore, the city doesn't consider it necessary to go back to a second DRP.
Okay, and could you comment on the setback? Because LPS 15 talks about 15 metres, and this at the most, I think, is 7.5 at the top and 6 metres at the bottom. Could you, because I mean, that's quite glaring. What does the city think?
Yeah, so this is perhaps going back to the original consideration in that the starting point is the 15-metre setback within the local planning scheme, and when the initial proposal proposed a 3-metre setback, one of the first question for consideration was what was the cogent reasons to depart from it, and as a guidance, the city has taken guidance from the draft Great Eastern Highway corridor strategy, just to help determine, I suppose, whether this would be in line with the future streetscape envisioned under that draft strategy. And in the draft strategy, it envisages a moderate setback. And in that draft strategy, moderate setback refers to a setback that's sufficient to allow for landscaping. But the second criteria is also requiring building to have glazing treatment to provide opportunities for activation. So we consider that the amended or the current proposal that's in front of us meets both those criteria, and therefore we consider that it's appropriate for support.
Thank you.
Other questions of Brandon? Brandon, should the recommendation for approval have that condition to do with the MRS, it being approved under the MRS as well?
Yes, well, I don't know, to be honest.
I think that was a rhetorical question almost.
Yeah.
I think it probably should do. Mr. Birch.
Well, just on that point, I have noticed a few. Some have it, some don't. And we had advice some time ago that it should be included. My view is if it's included, it's not a condition.
I agree with that entirely.
But aside from that, I wondered, and I was going to ask a question of the department whether anything had changed there, but because I do notice that some put it in and some don't, so I don't know whether the circumstances have changed. But yeah, I'll leave that to you. I did have a question, if I could, about the scheme amendment. You touched on the 15-metre widening. My understanding from reading the RA is that essentially that was a contingency if you wanted a service road.
That's right.
Because otherwise it seems to be a complete waste of land to have a setback of that much. So I wondered whether when you did the scheme amendment, because your strategy talks about something different, whether you considered including that in the, or getting rid of that in the scheme amendment.
Well, that's perhaps something that I could speak to the wider team about. There's no discussion to that effect at this stage, but yeah, certainly as part of the city's review scheme amendments or review of, those are part of the elements that we discussed. Yeah.
Seems to me we could be bumping into that provision quite regularly. Well, just about every time something comes up in Great Eastern Highway. The other thing is, and this is, I suppose it's hypothetical, but the other one is, I'm not convinced this is a warehouse use. I think it's something completely different, something new. And there are a lot of new uses that we didn't, like childcare centres. How many of those we dealt with? And 20 years ago, we probably hardly dealt with any. And this is happening all the time with the changing world that we live in. But did you give consideration as to, you still included in the warehouse definition, did you give some thought to maybe it is a different use? This is my personal view. I'm inclined to agree that a warehouse use is not appropriate here, but I'm not convinced that this particular use is necessarily bad planning for this area. That's a personal opinion, I suppose. But the question was, sorry, did you give thought as to whether this might be a separately classified use?
Yeah, we certainly gave that thought, but I suppose our default position is if there's land use definition within the scheme where it is where it does speak to, I guess, the use of the business or the property. Yes, it's a self-storage facility, but we believe that at the end of the day, it still has a storage purposes, so therefore fits in well with the warehouse land use, and we thought that would be the default position in the first instance, and that's also a land use that aligns with the scheme regulations.
Further questions?
Apologies, Chair, that was probably a statement, not as much as a question. Anyway.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Birch. Being no further questions, thanks, Brandon, for that. We'll move on to the item, which has a recommendation for approval with conditions. Is there a mover for that recommendation?
I'll move it.
Yes, Councillor Marks, thank you. And a seconder for that? Lindsay Baxter, thank you. Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, I was interested in a couple of points brought forward by the other members of the panel. Is it the best use? I don't think any of us think this is the best use for Great Eastern Highway, but under the circumstances where we've been somewhere in the vicinity from 5 to 10 years trying to get a change with our corridor strategy for Great Eastern Highway, this at least now is starting to look like something that fits on Great Eastern Highway. Mr. Birch saying, is it a warehouse or isn't it? Well, it looks like a warehouse. I presume it's going to smell like a warehouse, so I think it's a warehouse. I don't think we can get away from the fact that it is a warehouse. Should we have warehouses on Great Eastern Highway? We don't think so, but there it is. They've made a strong effort to have it fit in with the rest of the shops and uses along the Great Eastern Highway, and I guess that's a good point. As far as setbacks are concerned, I'm not too certain 7.5 is good, but it's there. Not much we can do. Parking, I hope they know what they're doing with parking. I've all heard it. They don't need much parking. I hope that's correct, because if not, there'll be trouble there. So adding it all up, am I really happy with it? No, but it's there. There is no doubt that it is a lot improved on what it was, and I congratulate them for that, for making some effort there. I wish it wasn't there, but it is, and we have to accept that it's there. And obviously, SAT has done a lot of work on it, and they think it's okay. So I have to go along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm probably going to echo some of the comments made by Councillor Marks. I actually am of the view that the late written submission from Stuart and Helen Laddams quite frankly hits the nail on the head with regard to the use and the development of this site. However, I'm a realist and a pragmatist, and there is town planning legislation, being the Planning and Development Act and the Local Planning Scheme, which a decision-making authority must adhere to. The City of Belmont is seeking to make warehouse an X-use in this zone via an amendment to the Local Planning Scheme, probably for the very reasons articulated by the Laddams. However, a decision-making authority must determine a use or development based on the parameters which exist on the day. While the City of Belmont is seeking to improve the urban design and functionality of the areas along this important arterial road with the draft Great Eastern Highway Corridor Strategy, it is noted that Great Eastern Highway is currently eclectic inter alia with regard to uses, setbacks and building design. There are other developments and uses which are perhaps not ideal. The saving grace is that land use and development changes over time. I've noted that the use of warehouse is a D-use under the mixed-use zone in the local planning scheme, so it is discretionary, provided the use itself is generally compatible and the physical development can comply. Having regard to the invitation from the State Administrative Tribunal to reconsider the proposed development, I am somewhat reluctantly content that the design improvements which have been made and the positive reassessment by the City of Belmont officers can warrant approval to the application. The proposed building itself is a standard fit-for-purpose design in line with the requirements of the likely corporate operator. While this development is a bit more palatable, it will be what makes this development a bit more palatable is the high-quality landscaping as depicted in the amended documents. Accordingly, having regard to these comments, I'm prepared to vote to approve the proposal in accordance with the Responsible Authority report. I do have a foreshadow motions to amend some of the conditions to clarify and tidy up grammar and punctuation. Would you like me to move to those, Presiding Member?
So, Presiding Member, can I ask a question? If it's grammar and punctuation, maybe it can be dealt with administratively. We don't necessarily have to deal with it as
yes, I'm happy for that. Lindsay, are there other things that are more substantive?
I guess I will raise a substantial change to condition 32 with some rewording, and probably a substantial change to condition 5. Most of my other changes are really just grammatical and punctual.
Would you like to also add in the MRS condition?
Yes, I don't have that wording in front of me, although I think it's in the Town of Victoria Park.
Victoria Park one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know whether you want to handle that as part of the substantive motion that we include the condition relevant to the MRS.
Well, we could add it in. I'll just read that out. It's pursuant to clause 26 of the Metropolitan Region Scheme. This approval is deemed to be an approval under clause 24(1) of the Metropolitan Region Scheme. So if you're happy to include that in your suite of amendments.
Okay. Would you like me to proceed with my motions or?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. Look, I might go through them just in order, just to keep them in sort of numerical order. Condition number 5, I would move to change the wording of that to read, development shall be in accordance with the approved schedule, and all external materials and finishes shall be maintained to a high standard, including measures to prevent against vandalism. So it still has the same intent, just rather than the word stated, so including measures to prevent against vandalism.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Now, condition number 8, which is, if I could move on to that, is actually more of a grammatical thing. After the words.
So, what number?
Condition number 8. Yep. Okay. So, at the end of part B, the words to the satisfaction of the city just sort of sit there a little bit like an orphan. So I'm proposing that those words be inserted after the words that incorporates the following, and before the semicolon, that the words to the satisfaction of the city occur there, and then parts A and B can follow. Still retains the intent of the condition, just stops the words to the satisfaction of the city being a little orphan there. That's condition 8. Conditions 13, 20 and 30, if we could add the abbreviation WA to the back of main road so that it reads main roads WA. I know we often talk about just main roads, but their correct terminology is actually main roads Western Australia or main roads WA. And that makes it consistent with condition 32, which actually does state main roads WA. I know I do this quite a lot, but there's a reason why conditions have to be consistent. And I could draw your attention to a VCAT appeal of about 15 years ago. Condition number 15, clear with condition numbers 12, 20 and 30.
So just in relation to 30, I'm wondering if we need to vote on that one.
30?
Yeah, that's main roads, WA, we'll probably just...
Well...
13.
13.
I'm just proposing that we add WA in after main roads.
Yeah.
Ian. Yep.
Yeah.
But with that...
I'm not fussed.
Okay. Were they the grammatical or minor errors that you were talking about?
They are some of them, yes. Yep. So we're really just adding WA to the back of main roads wherever it appears. And I've picked up that it appears in conditions 13, 20 and 30. And condition 32 is okay. If I can move then back to condition 15, which again is just stopping the words to the satisfaction of the city from sitting there as an orphan, that can actually just be added in after the words or the local area under part B of that condition. So in fact, the words to the satisfaction of the city to be inserted immediately after the words or the local area rather than just hanging on its own. I mean, it could even be a formatting issue there.
Right. I don't think that needs, well, it might just be formatting.
No, these aren't substantive things, but I think it just tidies up the way the approval reads, which is my point. Condition 17, this isn't so much substantial, but I think the words prepared by the applicant can be deleted because all conditions are required to have documentation prepared by the applicant. But instead, in the brackets, insert the abbreviation PMP where it refers to a parking management plan. Because the abbreviation appears later in that condition, so it just keeps it consistent with the way abbreviations ought to be read. That's condition 17. I'm getting close to the end. Condition 31. Again, I think really just moving the words to the satisfaction of the city in between where it says as marked in red, and then insert the words to the satisfaction of the city 2, and then the semicolon, and then it would read parts 1, 2 and 3 of that condition. Okay, and then finally, I think from me, condition 32, I'd propose really to change the wording of the restrictive covenant to no vehicular access is permitted to or from Great Eastern Highway for the full frontage of that road between Acton Avenue and St Kilda Road.
From Acton Avenue to St Kilda Road.
That's correct, isn't it? Acton Avenue and St Kilda Road, yeah.
Okay. All right. Is that all, Lindsay?
Yes, it is, thank you.
I'm seeking a seconder for that. Is there a seconder? I'm happy to second that then. Okay. So is there any discussion on those amendments? That includes the new number 1 condition to do with MRS and the renumbering of all subsequent conditions. Okay, I'm going to put that then, all in favour of those changes. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Lindsay, the floor is still with you.
I don't have anything further to add other than my overview and summary of the application. Prepared to leave it at that. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you. Further speakers? Mayor Rossi. I'm still calling you Councillor. Councillor Rossi.
Don't worry, everybody does. Well, I'm going to speak against it. The rail storage units, when you look at the plan, it's still back onto Grayson Highway, just behind Glass, so they're still there. We talk about draft Great Eastern Highway plan. Well, that's a draft. So at the moment, the 15 metres is in play, and LPS 15 is still here. We don't know how many months or years for the draft Grayson Highway plan will come into play, and the needs of the area will change rapidly over the next 10 years. And I'm just really concerned of what we're setting a precedent here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Further speakers? Mr. Birch.
Chair, yes, I'm supporting the application. I don't agree with the sentiment that this is going to be detrimental to Great Eastern Highway or the entrance. I think it presents quite well. I'm not sure what the city expects for the full length of Great Eastern Highway has been mentioned. It's an eclectic mix and it's typical of a main road. And I think that the work that's been done through the mediation process, I think has substantially improved the building. We talk about rapidly changing uses and so forth. Well, this is a use that is dealing with something that's rapidly changing. We talk about higher density development. I've got a friend who's in the throes of not only moving house but moving office, and he's got two units like this. I think that's pretty common for many people, and this is responding to a changing needs in our society. So I have no hesitation in supporting the application as presented.
Thank you, Birch. Yes, Lindsay.
Clayton, I'm very sorry. We did discuss the possibility of deleting advice note 12, given that the city officer advised us that the signage was appropriate as part of the application. So I'm sorry, I forgot to add that into part of the motion.
Well, I can now, if you like. I'll speak now. So I'll commence my comments by suggesting or recommending we delete advice note 12. I'll seek a seconder for that. Thank you, Lindsay, for that. All in favour for that amendment? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, from my point of view, look, I support the recommendation. I accept or understand that maybe this use is not the most appropriate use on a road like this. It's probably better located in the sort of semi-industrial areas off the main road, but having been where we have been with this. The initial proposal I didn't support. I believed we could achieve better in this location. I accepted that the scheme would allow us to approve it in this location, but there were some hurdles that had to be jumped over on the way there. I congratulate the applicant for being open to making those changes. I think we've come quite a long way with this particular application, and I think it is now very presentable in terms of the way it addresses the street, the way it at least tries to provide an active frontage, and the quality of the landscaping. So I'm really very supportive of the proposal at this present time. So back to you, Councillor Marks, to wind up the debate.
Nothing really to add to that, Mr. Chairman. One thing I would like to say and congratulate the staff in the office, because I can actually hear things properly now. So there's been a big change in acoustics somewhere along the line, but because I couldn't hear them before previous meetings, but I can now. So congratulations to them, and I haven't got anything to add other than that.
Thank you. All right, that ends the debate on that. I'll now put the recommendation for approval with the amendments. All those in favour? Against? That's carried 4-1. Thank you to the councillors from the City of Belmont. And we'll just wait until we get the councillors from Victoria Park online. Councillor Melrose, I can see you there. Hiding in a dark corner, I think.
It's bright here. Just my face is a bit shadowy. Though I will be looking at my main computer screen, so my head will be probably turned for most of the meeting. But that's not me being rude. Just to announce it at the start.
And Councillor Minson, I can see you there too. So welcome to the two councillors. We'll go through the process now. Declarations of due consideration. Are members familiar with the material before you for this item? Yes, yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. Just moving on then to the item, which is the 18 multiple dwellings in Bentley. We have a presentation from Caitlin. Caitlin's in person there. Got 3 minutes, Caitlin. There you are.
Thank you, presiding member and DAP members. My name is Caitlin Beckman-Ball from Belmont Advisory, and I'm speaking in support of item 3.1 on the agenda on behalf of Swan Care Group. It's been well established by the state government through strategies such as ageing with choice and an age-friendly WA that the proportion of older people in our state is rapidly increasing, and having a choice of location and type of housing ensures that seniors can grow older in a residence that is suited to their individual needs and circumstances. Swan Care Group Incorporated has been a leader in the provision of accommodation for older Western Australians spanning a period of more than 6 decades. Non-for-profit and non-denominational, all resources are owned by the organisation and shared by the community. The Bentley Park Estate is one of a limited number of strategic redevelopment sites offering quality aged care accommodation and amenities within the Perth metropolitan area. In their annual review for the 2023 financial year, Swan Care reported a strong demand for their retirement village product, which has resulted in a rapidly increasing waitlist for both lease for life and rental accommodation options. Occupancy throughout that financial year remains at a steady 93.5% across the board. And without any new housing stock, they're solely reliant on turnover of existing accommodation to meet their demands. The development, the subject of this application, seeks to address this demand by providing 18 independent living apartments. As you'll note in my written deputation, we have requested 2 modifications to the conditions. and associated advice notes. I won't repeat our request verbatim, but rather reiterate some of the key points. Swan Care have heard through extensive market research and engagement that a key requirement for residents looking to move into the complex is the provision of at least one car bay per apartment. The demand for these apartments are from potential residents who are independent and active. The removal of Bay 18 will compromise the marketability of the apartment complex. A landscape master plan for the Bentley Park estate continues to evolve with each site that is developed. This development not only includes the proposed landscaping within the indicative development site, but also substantial planting along the proposed Grandis Boulevard extension and the pedestrian extension to the Graham Crescent. Swan Care is a not-for-profit organisation and registered charity that is shaping the cultural identity of its community with enhanced public realm, community spaces and curated community activities. It's our opinion that this approach is consistent with the public art policy's key objectives. Finally, with me today, I have Paul on behalf of Swan Care, Tracy from Bridge 42, and Rebecca and Adrian from Idell Peterson Hook Architects to answer any questions the panel may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Panel members, are there questions? Ms. Lindsay.
Caitlin, thank you. In your request for deletion of condition 11C, which I think is the issue to do with the deletion of Bay 18, Bay 18 sits outside the secure part of the complex. Okay. The other thing, well, okay, no, sort of just noticed that, but are these units for sale, as in they're going to be strata titled and sold, or are they part of a rental kind of arrangement?
Could answer that one better. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. So to explain it a little bit, these would be what we term sold under a lease for life arrangement, which so that they're not actually sold. A loan is transferred to Swan Care, and when the resident leaves, we would return that minus the deferred management fees to them after their estate or whatever is resolved. So
okay, so similar to lifestyle village kind of arrangements, yes, in a way.
Yes.
Alrighty, okay, thank you. That's all I have for the moment, but
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Councillor Minson.
Yeah, on the parking, I noticed that there's one Acrod Bay in the parking arrangement. So is the intent that we're talking about one parking bay for one apartment? Is the intent that the one Acrod Bay is kind of aligned to one apartment? So there's, I guess, one apartment leased with a Acrod Bay.
That's the same. Perhaps just sit here.
Yes. Yes, thanks for the question. That one is always a dilemma. We tend to allocate bays to the apartments in our typical developments. However, we find the Acrod Bay one that will become one person may enter, and then we might get a turnover, and I guess at the end of the day, we've only got one, and we can only offer it to one apartment at a time. So we always prioritise it based on the need. However, if the question is more to do with whether the wide bay 18 is an inside versus an Acrod Bay internally, it really comes down to accessibility and all those sort of things. So it is a tricky one, and while we don't allocate them, we do our best to satisfy the needs of the residents at the time.
Just see another one on the parking again. So I guess you say that there was some market research done, and that the sentiment was that most people would like a bay. I guess with 18 and the proposal, I guess, to have one out of the 18, not have a bay. Was there also, I guess, any feedback during that market research that some people didn't need a bay?
Our site itself is already constrained in terms of its parking. So we have all the product all the buildings from our 1960s through to the 1980s that were built without parking throughout. We've had to build a multi-storey car park to keep up with the demand for parking across the site, and it is something that our sales people say that everyone asks for. Some people might want 2 cars. We don't provide space for two cars. So at that stage, they can choose to downsize their car numbers. But at this stage, our research says that it's 1 car bay per apartment.
Sorry.
Question?
My name is Adrian. The intent of allocating a car bay for apartment is also about independence, because these are very active, able people that are moving into these apartments. If we take the opportunity for a car bay away from them, then that creates more risk and creates more isolation to them. We've gone through a lot of design processes for the last 7-8 years about opening up Swan Care, removing this need for fences and gates and isolated areas, allowing the public to come in to use facilities and to share and mix with the residents. But it's also equally important for them to have that sense of independence. You take a car bay out and they have to rely on someone else or something else.
Further questions?
So
Yes.
Chair, just on the community feedback, it kind of it wasn't, I guess, too much kind of actual feedback kind of listed in there. That say that there was quite a bit of engagement in that. But I was wondering, I guess particularly with the drop-in with the 3 neighbouring properties, it was kind of said that, you know, subsequently no one came back and provided any feedback to Swan Care. But I was wondering if there was, I guess, a sentiment of when they were there and engaged, what their, I guess, immediate kind of feedback was.
Sure. So the 3 adjoining properties, obviously they're owned by Swan Care, and the residents within them we have engaged at every step along this process. So we've had a number of design iterations, some that were taller, some that were, obviously in between, and we've arrived at this based on all of their feedback, and also the feedback of the DRP, and the residents themselves have, I guess, been happy with what product they have, and the alternative that they currently have is the unutilised products or cottages that are existing there at the moment. So they see it as a benefit. We've learnt from prior developments in terms of overshadowing and all that. So we've taken all that on board. And it's not just their thoughts, it's also the wider Swan Care community as well. We've had a number of sessions with them, the wider community. We've also got internal committees as well that we've met with along the way. So there's an infrastructure committee, a Bentley Park resident committee. So there's lots of engagement along that journey.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Councillor Melrosa.
Just in relation to the request to remove condition 9, when referencing the town's local planning policy 29, it explicitly says that the public art component, the distinguishing feature of the works is that a professional artist or artist team is wholly, partly or partly responsible for the creation of said works. Where your justification for removing the condition, it mentions a number of elements. Who was the artist that has contributed or designed these elements so that they would meet the definition of public art?
So through the chair, sorry, those are elements that the architects and the landscape architects have had input through over the course of iterations of not only this development but previous developments. So not specifically a public artist or an artist themselves, but through architects and landscape architects and incorporating wayfinding and signage throughout the precinct.
Further questions?
No.
Okay. In relation to parking bay 18, that's undercover, isn't it? In a way, it's got an overhang. Does that limit the range of plants and the ability of plants to survive?
Sorry, it's Adrian here. We do have a professional landscape architect that's specifically and carefully created a selection of species based around their location, taking full consideration where there is overhang and shade. The shade is actually really important because not only are we providing shade via the building above, we are then placing seats in other areas where people and residents can naturally just gravitate. And a big part of living on and moving around and not being isolated within just your apartment is actually having facilities at ground level. One of the things we've noticed on recurring visits, wherever we can place a seat or place a wall next to some landscaping under shade, it's always used. And it always becomes just really quite an informal area just to come and meet and hang out. Might be for 10 minutes or it might be for an hour before moving on somewhere else. But all of the species have been selected and placed around the building and also further away from the building based on their relationship to the master plan, but based on where they specifically are and how much sunlight they're having. So on the southern area where this pocket is, it's more of a lush, deep green series of species, not necessarily just native species in this particular area because it is going to be in the shadow of the building regardless of the overhang. But yeah, it's all been considered.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? No. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll move on to the officers of the town. Where's Mr. Birch?
Thank you, Chair. I'll get in first and just ask the officers if they can let us know their thoughts on the requests in relation to the two conditions. Okay. To kick things off.
And apologies to Mr. Cruikshank for not getting you on first.
That's okay, I understand. That's all right, all good. So sorry, I guess I was going to just talk about sorry, do you want me to talk about the conditions first? I was going to talk about that anyway, but maybe I'll do my preamble first and then get to that. That's okay. I guess my general preamble was going to be that this is a project that's gone through much review by our design review panel. I think it went through 4 meetings, maybe 5 meetings, maybe. Went through at least 3 meetings before the DA was even lodged. It started out as quite a different proposal. It was a 4-story proposal. There was some compromised outcomes from the amenity of the residents. The applicant went away and was very receptive, as they have been throughout the whole process, to look at making changes to the plans, to the extent that they had various different options that they were looking at as to how to proceed forward. They sought the town's feedback, of design review panel's feedback, to get a sort of an agreed direction. They've gone away in that agreed direction, and I guess just to say that it's resulted in a very good outcome, and that's obviously reflected in the design review panel's feedback that, you know, it doesn't have to think the words at the end of something to the effect of, doesn't have to be expensive to achieve good design. That good design can be achieved through good design. So I guess just obviously we'll talk about the conditions in a minute, but I don't think the focus on talking about conditions should overshadow the good design work that's being done and the merits of this proposal. So I guess if we do talk about the conditions, so the applicants request amendment to condition 9 in relation to public art. So I guess our report largely speaks for itself as to, we have a local planning policy that calls for a public art contribution. It does say, however, that in instances where there's a structure plan, a local development plan, or some form of planning instrument that contains alternative requirements for public art, then the 1% contribution of the policy doesn't apply. In this instance, the master plan that's been developed and been in place for a number of years is silent on the matter of public art, so we've defaulted to a local planning policy 29. In the applicant's deputation, which we've read and now have seen what the applicant's position is, the applicant's indicated towards the end that they consider there is a need to review the master plan with a view to perhaps identify key gateway points where public art can be incorporated. So that's not information that we had received from the applicant prior to reading this presentation. But I guess it highlights that the applicant's open to potentially amending the master plan to deal with public art on a holistic basis across the whole estate rather than on an individual basis for each development application. So I guess in light of that information, we're potentially open to some a modification to condition 9 and potentially a new advice note that goes along with that. Would you like me to maybe suggest that now, Mr. Presiding Member? Yep. So condition 9 currently, as worded, essentially requires a public art contribution to be made prior to lodging an application for a building permit. That's a short-term thing, obviously lodging for a building permit. I'm suggesting that maybe condition 9 could be reworded to say prior to occupancy, the applicant owner is to contribute a sum of 1% of the value of the total construction value towards public art, unless otherwise agreed to by the town. And then add an associated advice note to the effect of the town notes the applicant's intent to separately review the master plan in relation to the delivery of public art across the estate. Full stop. The town is agreeable to a public art contribution not having to be made for the subject development prior to occupancy if an amendment to the master plan is approved for the delivery of public art at key gateway points across the estate. So I guess the intent of the amendment to condition 9 and the new advice note 12 is to give the applicant the ability to submit an amendment to the master plan to deal with the issue of public art across the whole estate. With I guess the idea being that if the master plan is amended and approved, then we would not necessarily require this development to provide a 1% public art contribution. So I guess I'll leave that for the members to consider. In relation to condition 11C and the removal of the car parking bay, that was a recommendation of the design review panel. It was felt that having this car bay sit out in front of the building between the street and the building was probably a harsh interface. And I guess the need or the recommendation for that bay to be deleted also should be considered in the context that there is a reduced provision of on-site landscaping for the development. The applicants made some submissions today as to why the car bay is proposed from a market perspective. Obviously, from our perspective, there's a market-driven outcome that the applicant's seeking versus a planning outcome that we're proposing. And I guess giving precedent or priority to the planning outcome, we would just say that there is a surplus of car bays based on the R-code requirement. And we consider it would be a better streetscape outcome to have not that car bay in that location. So that's probably all to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Questions of the officers? Yes, Lindsay.
Thank you, Rob. Just with respect to the public art matter, normally that is picked up at each development that the town receives, obviously. I mean, how many more sites are there within this Swan Care complex are there that you could attract public art condition for?
There's many the master plan contemplates a regeneration of the housing stock across the estate over a number of years. So yeah, potentially there'll be a number of similar sites that would,
Alrighty, okay. And the Bentley Park master plan just applies to their complex, it's not a broader thing for Bentley and all the other institutional uses around there.
No, the Bentley Park master plan is basically the Swan Care Village master plan.
Yeah, okay.
So marketing name Bentley Park, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. depending on which way this goes, at some point you might be required to read out that condition and advice note again.
Sure, yeah.
So I tried writing it down, just couldn't quite get it all
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
But yeah, thank you for that. All right. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you. All the questions of Robert. Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Just a clarity on the advice note to the amendment. We need to change, I guess, the existing amendment regarding the public art contribution about 2 options. I guess that can stay the same with the amendment.
That could stay the same. I guess that would apply if the applicant, that would still apply if the applicant were not to go through the process of amending the master plan and getting an agreement for an alternative approach.
And just another question on some of the performance assessments, or just one actually. There was, I guess, a deviation from the proposed site cover being 72% with a maximum of 65%. Is, I guess, the team complies with. One of the reasons, I guess, in the performance assessment was that the extent of open space provided across the whole of the estate was used, I guess, as a way to justify the reduction of this particular site. Just wondering, because my view of the estate is that it's quite low on an open space. So I was just wondering which kind of bits were kind of considered when we were saying that there was a lot of open space already in this estate.
Thank you, through the presiding member. Thank you, Councillor Nixon. When we were undertaking the assessment of things like site cover and provision of open space is actually based on parent lot area. The property hasn't been survey strated or subdivided, so it's the parent lot, which is the bigger lot. If you take that into account, it's compliant. When we were doing undertaking an assessment of some of the provisions, we looked at an indicative site area, and that is where it covers, the site cover is a little bit greater.
So it was just a notional site area that we established for the purpose of undertaking an assessment, because this is a site within a larger parent lot. Yeah, I guess we're still of the view that there still appears to be sufficient a large amount of open space throughout the whole estate, and to sort of just look at it sort of regimentally that there should be open space for this seemed a little bit unreasonable when you look at the estate as an overall complex. We felt that was a reasonable approach.
Yeah. So I guess there's a bit of open space that from when I've been to the site, there's a bit of a grassed area, I guess, in between this proposed site and the larger high rise or apartment block on the corner of Jarrah Road. So when I've been there, it seems like they utilise that public open space like overflow car parking kind of a use. So I was wondering if, I guess, that gets considered, that it's not typically used, I guess, as an open space, and if there's within the master plan, so right across the whole master plan, whether that site there, I guess, is proposed to develop in the future.
My recollection is that is another development site, that piece of land there. I think it's another apartment complex. Looking over to my right, yes, another apartment complex as well. Yep.
Further questions? Robert, just in that revised condition 9, I understand what you're trying to do, but you put at the end, unless otherwise agreed to by the town. What if the condition is about getting 1%, are you suggesting the town might agree to something less, or?
No, my intent probably was the addition of those words was giving the town the ability to not impose any public art contribution for this building if they have gone through the process of amending the master plan and coming up with a alternative that's agreed to.
Okay. I didn't get that. Sorry, I didn't get that in the condition. I get it in the advice note.
Well, maybe the word, those extra words aren't needed. The condition could just read alone to say prior to occupancy 1%, and then the advice note gives the out, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No further questions?
Yeah, just on the trail of that, Chair. So I guess, the intent would be that, without any, I guess, developer contributions through the 1% or other, that the master plan, like a master plan proposal for throughout the precinct would be funded, I guess, out of it, a different funding source than an actual contribution. So you wouldn't get the contribution, but if the master plan proposed art, that art would be funded, I guess, to a separate, I guess, funding. Like it wouldn't be from like a bucket of reserve or sitting with the town or through.
No, it wouldn't come from funds or budget money that the town may hold. The way I see it is this alternative that the applicant may come up with would essentially talk to locations where art would be delivered, maybe some concepts of what that could be, but it would be wholly the responsibility of Swancare to fund that. Yeah, and not even. Sorry, I'd say it wouldn't necessarily have to be the 1%. It could be whatever value is agreed to by the town through that process.
Okay. No more questions? Okay, thank you, Robert. Thanks for that. We'll move to the item. Oh, sorry, Lindsay, yes? Yes, Lindsay.
Sorry, could I just ask the town to just reread this possible amended condition number 9 again? Because it's kind of evolving a little bit. So perhaps your final possible version of it?
Sure. So remove the words lodging an application for building permit and replacing that with occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the condition, add the words unless otherwise agreed to by the town.
Mm-hmm.
So if I read that in full, prior to occupancy, the applicant owner is to contribute a sum of 1% of the value of the total construction value towards public art, brackets, refer to related advice note, close brackets, unless otherwise agreed to by the town.
Okay, and you consider that the advice note gives you that flexibility?
Well, that was the intent. Yeah.
Yes, yes, okay. All right, I'll have to think that through in the next couple of seconds. Yep, thank you, presiding member.
Okay, no more questions. We'll move on to the item. Have a recommendation for approval with conditions. Is there a mover for that item? The remover.
I
think it's a bit delayed.
Oh.
Councillor Minson.
I'm sorry.
Clayton.
Didn't see your hand move, Councillor Minson. You're very, very quick. Is there a seconder for that? Seconder?
Oh, happy to second.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Mr. Birch. Councillor Minson, over to you.
Yeah, not too much to say, just to echo some of the comments that have already been made about the good design outcomes, and I guess the collaborative approach that the developer's been undertaking with the town and particularly the design review panel. Good development outcome here. So I'm happy to support the recommendation. I guess pending some amendments.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Birch.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, there's no argument about the appropriateness of the use in this case. P use, and obviously a very essential use for the area and also for the ageing population. So that's beyond question. I think it's been through a very thorough assessment process, and appears as though the applicants have responded very well to the matters raised. I'm happy to amend it. Well, I'd like to move an amendment to condition 9 along the lines of Mr. Cruikshank has said there. I don't know whether we're going to come up with anything better here today, but I think the intent's pretty clear, and I think that that's understood, and that gives the scope for the officers or the city to deal with the town. Sorry, to deal with that. And I also would move, and I can do that as part of this or as a separate motion, the removal of 11C, removal of that.
Ian, I wonder if we could deal with them one at a time. And also, does your amendment to condition 9 include the amendment to advice note 3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if...
I think that's probably the better way to deal with it. There might be some people want to speak about the other one.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is that Mr. Birch has moved an amendment to condition 9 and to advice note 3 as per Mr. Cruikshank's words. Is there discussion on that? No? Okay, I'm going to put that amendment. Oh, sorry, I need a seconder for it. I beg your pardon. Yes, Lindsay Baxter, thank you. Okay, so we've got a seconder. Now, again, is there any discussion on that? No, all right, I shall put that amendment. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Mr. Birch, back to you.
I'll move an amendment that condition 11C be deleted. And if I have a seconder, or I'll have a seconder, I'll speak to that, my reasons.
At the moment, your screen is frozen. All three of you with hands up. Still
interesting. You've got your hand up, mate. You're voting already.
We may just have to use our voice. It's just
so. What was that, Ashley?
Can you still hear us? Sorry, can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our screens are frozen as well, so we might just have to vote via verbal, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. I need a seconder for that. Is there a seconder to remove?
Yeah, Clayton, it's Lindsay. I'll second Ian's motion in relation to condition 11C.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Mr. Birch, to you, if there's any discussion.
Thank you. Just very briefly, firstly, I'll say that design reviews, I think they do add a lot to this process, and they've certainly added a lot in this case. But I think the applicant has submitted plans with it as a car bay, and I feel that in this case, I'm not sure that we have strong grounds for the requirement to delete that bay and change it. I think the overall scheme of things, I don't think it is of great significance, and I know we shouldn't be influenced by market-driven matters, but there also is the practicality of the uses, and I think it's been pretty well demonstrated or indicated from people who deal with these things that it is important to the function of the use, which is, as I say, is specifically what the site is zoned for. So, I think we can easily justify the sticking with the plan as submitted and delete that condition.
Thank you. Ms Baxter.
Thank you, Clayton. I wouldn't support Ian's comments. Although this is in relation to landscape, I think be short. I think the landscaping will be high quality, and we're talking about getting a number of mature type trees in there, and even some low shrubbery type landscaping near this car parking bay. So I think that will mitigate.
I've lost. It's all frozen.
Thank you.
I lost you after the word mitigate.
Okay, so my comment was that there will still be landscaping that can mitigate against the positioning of the car parking bay there.
Thanks, Lindsay. It is actually, I get what you're saying. It just slightly froze again there, but that's okay. Further speakers on this amendment? No? Okay, I'm supportive of.
So I've got my hand up.
Yes. Yes.
Chair, yeah, I just speak in opposition to the amendment. So I think a few things. Obviously, the town has undertaken their performance assessment, ending that the condition would stand, and that the car parking bay would be changed to soft landscaping and planting. But I guess a few of those ones are a bit more critical than others. Like the soft landscaping requirement is actually quite short, about half the requirement, so quite a significant shortfall. And the performance assessment obviously refers to removing this car parking bay to make up that significant shortfall. So I think we'd have to kind of address that as well if we were to delete the condition. Again, same performance assessment on the variation to the tree requirements. I know that they're saying that they're planting a lot of small trees, so you kind of maybe get the total coverage in excess of what the deemed to comply numbers are. But I think there are, I guess, unique qualities to medium and large trees that you can't probably make up with just adding more and more small trees. So I think again that performance assessment also again refers to changing this car parking bay to landscape. I guess there's other comments about independence for the members leasing out these areas, which is obviously very valid. But again, I think 1 out of 18 potential apartments, I think that very, very likely that you'll find aged people in our community that don't have cars and don't need cars and don't need a car parking bay. My gran lived on Talbot Place, 5 metres down from this location with a car parking bay in front of her house. She never used it, didn't have a car. So there's definitely people out there that don't need car parking bays. And I think like we talked about Bay, there's a lot of flexibility in their structure in terms of leasing that if there was, I guess, a change of leasees that, the bay without the car parking can kind of rotate around, similar to, I guess, the access to the Acrod Bay. So it's not like you're stuck with one bay that doesn't have a car parking, and then you have to kind of continually find someone in the lease arrangement to fulfill that criteria. So I guess that kind of probably addresses all those concerns. With the independence, there's obviously a high frequency bus service out the front, so anyone that doesn't have a car, has quite good access to public transport. So again, probably addressing those concerns. I guess it's also to note that car bay is outside the security area, so it's kind of a little bit of a hanger-on anyway. It's kind of not really, I guess, the same service you're providing the rest of the apartments. So I guess just in closing that, because the performance assessment, relies quite heavily upon the justification of the clause in its in its reasoning, removing it, I think actually kind of creates a few more issues that guess aren't addressed just by deleting the clause. So.
Thank you, Councillor Minson. Any further speakers? I actually was thinking the other way, but I'm swayed by Councillor Minson's argument. I think he has presented the argument well, and therefore I'm quite happy that the car bay be returned or removed, and that landscaping be placed there for the reasons that Councillor Minson has mentioned. So if there's no further speakers, I'll go back to the mover, Mr. Birch.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last comment is that the performance assessment has been done on a notional lot, and the statutory authority to do that is perhaps arguable. So I'm not convinced that that condition would be sustainable. Arguably, this should have been considered, and I think it was very sensible and very practical the way it was dealt with. I've no argument with that whatsoever, but we do need to understand that it was a notional lot. It's not an actual lot. Yeah, just to conclude, I think that the condition doesn't really add anything significant in the overall scheme of things. The design review panel is one of the most glowing responses I've seen from a design review panel, and I don't know whether this the removal of this car bay would change that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now put the amendment. All those in favour? Against?
Don't know what.
Sorry, Councillor Melrose, which way did you vote? Sorry. Councillor Melrose?
Yes. What was the question?
Sorry.
I've got a bit of a lag here. I'm only on one bar, so.
Oh, okay. I put the motion to remove or to delete 11C, which is to remove car bay 18. Did you vote in favour or against?
In favour.
In favour of its removal? Yes. Okay. The motion is carried then, 3-2. So back to the substantive motion. Mr. Birch, you've still got the floor.
No, I haven't got any more to say on it. I think overwhelmingly it's precisely what the planning framework is for this area, and as I say, it's been a very thorough assessment process, and I think an excellent outcome.
Okay, thank you for that. Further speakers? Yes, Lindsay.
Thank you. The proposal for 18 multiple dwellings within the Swan Care Bentley complex is acceptable, notwithstanding a considerable amount of discretion being applied to the development. Multiple dwellings are a key use on the land, so it's consistent with the expectations of the urban form for the immediate area, and therefore it's also compliant with the strategic and statutory intentions for the site. I'm prepared to accept the assessment in the Responsible Authority report against the performance criteria on the basis that the history of town planning, and in particular the residential design codes, seeks to ensure the health and amenity of residents with respect to the salient issues of light, air and ventilation, which the development achieves. Further, the proposed development builds on the amenity by virtue of dwelling orientation, site area, walkability, facilities and landscaping. It is noted that the Swan Care Bentley complex is almost a time lapse, with development occurring over a period of 60 years, and thus each new development is able to improve upon previous stages in line with modern architecture and standards. So accordingly, I will vote to support the application. We have moved in relation to conditions 9 and 11. I do foreshadow again just some grammatical tidy-ups, if I may, presiding member. And one change to one condition, which doesn't change the intent, just rewords it a tiny bit. If I can outline those grammatical changes, please, thank you. Alrighty, so condition number 5, just adding the word or the letter A in between or in front of the word building. So it reads for a building permit. That would be consistent also with condition 9, which would also say prior to an occupancy permit. Conditions 10, 11 and 21 also to have the word A inserted before the word a building permit. And that's consistent with some of the other conditions that do have that grammatical correction. So they're conditions 5, 9, 10, 11 and 21.
Chair, sorry, can I just ask a question? Mr. Cruikshank, does this building require an occupancy permit?
Yes.
It will, okay.
Oh, let's say yes. Yes, class 2, so yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, condition 18. I propose to reword that a little bit, just so that it reads, prior to the commencement of any development, a construction management plan prepared by a suitably qualified person is to be prepared in consultation with the town and thereafter submitted to the town. And then the rest of the sentence reads, okay, the plan must address. Now, the reason for that is because it removes the duplication and inconsistency of referring to the town and then the local government in the same sentence. So do you want me to read that again? Condition 18 would say, prior to the commencement of any development, a construction management plan prepared by a suitably qualified person is to be prepared in consultation with the town and thereafter submitted to the town. And the rest of the sentence, the rest of the condition as written.
So, Lindsay, you've moved those changes.
Yes.
Seconder for those. Yes, Councillor. Is there any discussion on those? I guess not. So I'm going to put that. All those in favour? Show your hands. You've frozen. Yes. Okay, that's carried unanimously.
Everyone's.
Thank you.
Everyone's got their hands up.
I know. Getting a delayed reaction here. So, Lindsay, it's still with you. Is there anything else? It's frozen.
I don't have anything further. I think we've got to 9 and
further speakers.
And removed as well.
Further speakers? No, I support the proposal. I'm not going to speak for too long because this system seems to keep freezing all the time. So, but it is a good proposal, well designed, and a very thorough assessment of the proposal by the town as well. So going back to the original mover, which is Councillor Minson, to wind up the debate.
No, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll now put the motion to approve as amended. All those in favour? Right, okay. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Just moving on then, under this section, there's no forms 2, there's no reconsiderations. Under Part D, there are stat matters listed, I'm sure. Was there any general business? I don't think so. And I'll close the meeting at 2:42. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah.